First of all, I would like to welcome the speakers and the moderators of today. You are our intellectual patrons, and the representatives of the media present are also welcome. They have already made an interview with Mr. Lomnici. Dear friends, as you know, the European has called on its member states, or the 26 member states, to consult its citizens on a wide range of issues concerning the future of Europe. So they urged us to collect the opinions of the citizens, of the people, and to submit these opinions to the Commission. We are always optimistic, and we always think that these are benevolent requests. So, in the name of the sovereignty of the people, we have been organizing an increasing number of conferences. So from the statistical point of view, Hungary is first or second in the EU as far as the expression of opinion is concerned. I think it is a very optimistic sign of the interest of the people. But, however, sometimes we are also pessimistic. Okay, patriotism and also our spirit expects us to express our opinion freely, but still there are certain examples that by no means guarantee that our opinions will be channeled to the right place and our opinion will be taken into consideration. More than 50 civil initiatives have been launched recently, and maximum 4 or 5 reached the European Commission, and there were only one or two initiatives that were enacted in a piece of legislation. But let's say that we are organizing these conferences, seminars. The reason why we are mobilizing people is that we would like to live with our right of civil freedom, our liberty. We would like to use our right to express free opinions. And this is the reason why it is absolutely clear to me that indeed we do need the reform of the European Union, because a change, the necessity of a change is inevitable. The reason why we organize conferences is also to mobilize more and more people. A good example of it was our conference organized in 2019, the Civil Society or conference, and at our third Congress, 14 countries were represented, and we were able to set up a 5-member gremium, a member of which, a prominent member of which is among us today. I'm talking about Monsieur Henri Mulhouse, who used to be the head of the ECOSOC at the EU. So I think let's greet him. It's a fantastic thing that he could join us today. Thank you very much, sir. We are modest people, but still, I am very proud of the fact that I have colleagues who, and there is no incoming. Unfortunately, we cannot hear anything. Okay, so he's talking about Mr. Zoltán Lomnici, Secretary General of EUCED, and last but not least, Mr. Károly Laurent, our expert economy is responsible for international relations is also very efficient and effective in this field. Let's greet him again. Thank you very much, Karchi. So let us see what has happened recently. The essence is that at our third Congress in 2021, not only rank and files members like us were present, but also with the support of the National Confederation of Workers' Councils, we managed to mobilize Christian right-wing conservative trade unions in our activity, whose presence and contribution is very valuable, who really can promote the birth of this reform I am talking. We have Italian, Spanish, British, and Albanian trade unions who joined us, affiliated with us, and I think it is also fantastic that, for example, the Italian UGL has more than 2 million members in Italy. This is simply a wonderful thing. There are two things, what we usually say, there are two things that means real representativeness in the civil society. So civic society, church, and trade unions, civil organizations who attract and can mobilize large masses. And when we speak about national Christian conservative trade unions, we should also mention that we worded our final declaration. This is a joint declaration, something that everyone can sign. There was no debate, dispute. The final declaration was elaborated, and if you allow me, I would like to highlight a few notions from this declaration. The first is that naturally we in the European Union we would like to cooperate with the European Union as much as possible. We think that we are in the heart of the European Union, and we should be part of a normal Europe. However, the present leadership of the present-day European Union strive at formulating a centralized union. We reject it. I think the European civic initiative should be reformulated. It was hard work. We collected 1 or 2 million signatures, and I think this is highly bureaucratic, very difficult. We did it, but in the future it should be made easier. And when we submit these initiatives, they should not be wiped out. The next thing where we also had a common ground is the sovereignty of the member states. When we joined the EU, both Hungary and the European Union acknowledged the sovereignty of our country, and this latent maneuvering should also be forgotten when legislation comes to fore. Right now, we are in a very difficult position due to the latest decision of the Commission, but we will talk about it later. The next point where we agreed was that we all stand up for the defense of the European Union borders, and we all reject illegal immigration. Should the Union fail to protect us, then the member states should defend themselves against illegal migration. Climate policy, just a few words because we have experts among us. Yes, of course, green energy. And the protection of the nature is absolutely of primary importance. But sober at, experts in Europe all state that this is simply impossible to solve without the nuclear energy. What we see that Prime Minister Viktor Orban also supports it. Foreign policy, and that's something which is interlinked with the previous statement of mine. We must respect different traditions, customs, and political structures, and the relations must be based on shared economic benefits. The role of the civil society organizations and the most organized players, the trade unions, should also aim to promote common policies, shared responsibility, and the general common good for all citizens. It is called the one vote method. Trade unions should promote these objectives rather than play a class struggle role. The Hungarian economy right now is booming, flourishing, and if the Central Asian and African countries can somehow assist us and we can assist them, then I would say that this is a mutual interest. And finally, a very important task. It is very, very important to defend the Judeo-Christian civilization. This is an enormous struggle. Of course, we are not striving at a parallel society. We do not want, we would like to protect our children when they are minors. Sexual education is the task of the parents, so LGBTQ lobbyist groups should not be allowed to preach at schools or kindergartens. So this was all I wanted to say. Thank you for your kind attention. Take care of yourself, and let us listen to the fantastic presentations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for these introductory words. I would like to extend a warm welcome again, not only those who are present, but also who are following us on Facebook. We have a lot to discuss this evening because we can state that the world is in turmoil. From the east, we have the threat of war, and at the same time, the single-pole world order showing the dominance of the United States is about to cease. Russia and China are getting stronger economically. The United States is also trying to keep up. It doesn't want to lag behind in the story. And what we are seeing at the same time is that the European Union is somehow engaging in an ideological war, destroying itself, annihilating itself, giving up its values, its cores, its roots. And I would like to turn to Mr. Henri Melos, our dear guest today, and ask him what he thinks about this current situation. Where is the role, or what is the role of the European Union, and how is the condition of the European Union, in your opinion, when all of these changes are going on in the world?
You can just talk.
Okay. Köszönöm. Thank you very much. I'm sorry not to be able yet to speak Hungarian, although you invite me sometimes, so I think next time. Oh, yeah. Is it okay? Yes. It works. So I have a particular the question of actual situation is a particular importance for me personally. I would just tell you something. That, I've been involved in the question of Ukraine since many years, but mainly since 2013, 2014. In fact, I've been the unique president of the institution to be able to be on the Maidan square of Kiev in the winter 2013, 2014, to stand by the civic movement and to speak to the audience. Not to speak against Russia, because I always have good links and cooperation with Russian civic society, with Russian civic chambers, but to fight for Ukrainian sovereignty, for the Ukrainian civic movement, and is it correct? No?
De a fordítást nem hallják?
A hangot nem halljuk. Nincs
azoknak
belőle
a-
hangunk, igen. Ki hall házasságban? De így hallom. Így is
Ötös sávon kell hallgatni a tolmácsolást, oda tessék tenni.
Technikus próbáljuk kérni, jó, de esetleg a mikrofonnal is
De tessék az ötösre tenni, és jó lesz. Tessék kipróbálni.
egy más.
Ötös szám.
Sorry? What's wrong?
Change the microphone. Probably.
Please speak a bit louder. Speak a bit louder.
A bit louder?
Yes, a bit louder.
Yes, you have to tell me. Can you hear me? No? No, they don't hear in the translation booth. Should I speak there?
De egyébként hallják? Most rendben van, okés? Jó, akkor it's okay.
So it's okay? It's okay? But can the translator?
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
No, it's okay. Okay, sorry. So, no, I just say that the question of Ukraine is very important in my heart. I was saying when I was president of a European institution, I was the unique president to go on Maidan in the winter 2013-2014. I spent 4 days on the square, and then I came back in January and I spent some more days. I never spoke, because I spoke to the audience there. I spoke to the civic movement, supporting the civic movement against corruption, which is a big problem in Ukraine, for the sovereignty, but never against Russia. Despite that, fortunately, because of countermeasures, the Russian government put me on a blacklist. But I'm still someone in favor of dialogue. And I will just tell you that last Friday, so 1 week ago, I organized with one of my French friend, who is a senator of the French Republic. We organized in the French Senate the first meeting of parliamentarians from the 4 countries, so-called Normandy format, who are dealing with the peace process in Ukraine for the question of the Donbass. And we had 7 French senators and members of parliament, 5 Germans, members of the Bundestag from CDU and SPD, the two main groups, mainly from CDU. We had 6 members of the Rada of Ukraine, of the Ukrainian parliament, and we had the 2 presidents of the Committee for Foreign Affairs of the Duma and of the High Chamber of Russia. This was last Friday in the French Senate. It was the first time that the elected representative of the 4 countries responsible for the peace process met. And I was with friend of mine, with member of the Senate. We were the organizer of that meeting. And the meeting was peaceful and fruitful. There is a way to find a good solution in the Donbas region. There is a way to find a good solution to keep Ukraine and Russia staying and not coming into war, and to improve their relation. This way, this so-called Minsk Agreement was signed by the German Chancellor, French President, Russian President, Mr. Putin, and Ukrainian President at that time, Mr. Poroshenko, in Minsk in 2015. It's quite easy. On one side, the Ukrainian parliament should make reform to develop decentralization, to protect the minorities, including the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. And unfortunately, the actual government is too much pushing for the Ukrainian language against the Russian language, against the Hungarian language, Romanian language, and others. So the Ukrainian parliament has to make that effort for more decentralization in Ukraine, because in Ukraine you have the West, you have the East. In the East, as you know, all the people speak Russian, they don't speak Ukraine. We should let this diversity of Ukraine, and in the same time, Russia should stop to support the people in the Donbas. So all the elements for peace are there. But unfortunately, these elements, I will say, they are in the hands of the Europeans. These are the Europeans who should deal with the peace process between Ukraine and Russia. And the most active we should do, that means we, including you, the civil society, the parliament, to organize that dialogue, to create reconciliation, the best will solve, and not to have interference coming from the US or from other side. There is a real possibility, and I would like to praise the visit that your Prime Minister, Mr. Orban, made to Moscow 2 weeks ago. You know that after him, French President Macron went to Moscow, and after him, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And I think they had all three almost the same message. This message was, there is a possibility of a dialogue. There is a global interest of all of us, all Europeans, to go into a peace process. More than 14,000 people die in the Donbas region. And unfortunately, I would say they die for what? For nothing. Between Ukrainians and Russians, they speak the same language in that region. They are cousins. They have the same land. They share the same history. So this war was created by geopolitical reasons, but not by the people. And the more we involve the civil society, the civic movement, trade unions, parliamentarians, for the reconciliation among the people, the more we proceed on peace. You know, I'm French, but I remember exactly when I was a child, we were still taught that our enemies are the Germans. Fortunately, with people like General de Gaulle, Konrad Adenauer, Jean Monnet, and others, we have learned to learn each other. We have become friends. We have overcome that hate. And we are now, thanks to that, together, French and German in the European Union, we are now reconciliate. And this reconciliation has been made mainly by the people, by twinning of cities, by twinning by common activities. As President Chismadia explained, with the civic movement with 14 countries. This is the way to create reconciliation. And this is the way Ukrainian and Russian should not come to the reconciliation, not just between Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky, but between the elected members. And this is why we organize, I'm very proud to have organized this first meeting of parliamentarians of a fourth country last Friday. in Paris by French Senate. We'll organize the next meeting next month in Germany, in the Bundestag, in Berlin. And we would like to involve, of course, also Hungarian friends, Hungarian colleagues. And I think this is the way to push, not to just listen to the alarmist media from abroad, to the one who want a war because they want to sell weapons or because of any other geopolitical interest. We Europeans, we have to keep the interest and the protection of our land, of our Europe, in our own hands. Thank you very much.
Én érdeklődve
I was listening to you with a lot of interest and with pleasure. Actually, it was new information to me, and I was a little bit surprised. And I'm happy to hear that the leading politicians of the European Union has already turned towards Kiev. But let's not forget that practically Viktor Orban was the first president or the first prime minister who went to Moscow and tried to step up for the peace. And also, we mustn't forget that Péter Márki-Zay and András Fekete would have liked to send weapons to Ukraine. That's how they thought they should promote peace. So my question to this is whether the European Union is in a condition today, and you can talk about war if you want, but is the European Union in a condition today that it can prevail, it can make its interests prevail, either legally or economically? So in a geopolitical game where the United States acts as an aggressor and Russia is also there, what can be the role of the European Union?
És éppen beszélgettünk Henryvel ezt megelőzően.
We were talking about it with Henri. We had a lunch together, and I asked him if the whole European Union was based on a compromise between the French and the German, the two dominant nations, and neither of them wanted to have a scattered Europe, and no one wanted war in Europe. How did we get at the brink of the war in Europe? Why cannot Europe handle its own problems? Why is it so that the American interests have an impact on the political situation of Europe? When I talk about the United States, I'm not talking about a united nations, but for example, the Trumpian United States was something where American internal interests were represented, and under the Biden administration, let us be frank and sincere, we talk about liberal interests, the background interests which are represented, and their interest is that Europe and Russia should not cooperate, collaborate. This is something they achieved without any harm to the United States. What's more, the arm lobby still gained something from it. This smile, the British, the first president of, the first chair of the NATO, who said that the objective of the NATO is to keep the Americans inside, the Germans down, and the Russians outside. And I think this policy is still going on. For example, when I saw Trump's policy, for example, with China, and people say that he had a very bad relationship with the European Union, but his real problem was that the Germans had a 100 billion active balance with the European Union, and that was something he wanted to change, and that's the same with with China. So I think we should somehow handle our own issues ourselves, and we should not let the United States interfere with European affairs, interest groups who do not represent the national interests of the United States. To what extent is it possible, according to your opinion, that the European Union should somehow manage European issues itself? When we, for example, look at George Soros, who comes from the United States, and through his NGOs he tries to influence and interfere with European matters. The European Court of Justice this week passed an act. We saw the live broadcasting, and we saw the judge who tried to read the verdict, but he was reading from a piece of paper. We guess who has given this piece of paper to the judge. So what is the chance for the EU to be able to manage European affairs itself without foreign influence and interference? I would like to welcome everyone wholeheartedly, and just briefly reacting on the previous speakers. I think all of us, or each of us, are very pleased to listen to our kind French guest. What I would like to say is that people listed by Mr. Mulhouse, Jean Monnet, or de Gaulle, General de Gaulle, they were statesmen who had a firm vision about the European Union. As we know, de Gaulle followed the basic concept or principle of a Europe of strong nation states. But from another perspective, when we talk about the work of Paul-Henri Spaak, who is a left-wing politician, so maximum what they imagine is a prospering, efficient economic union, an equal competitor to India, China, and United States. India, an emerging economy with a population which is soon achieving that of China, but at the same time they cannot formulate such a concentrated power as China due to the fact that 30% of the Indian population is a minority nationalities and not Hindis. István Gyarmati, a security expert, called our attention to the fact that one of the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party has recently said that the Chinese Communist Party is Chinese in the first place and communist only in the second place. So what we can see that there are certain changes occurring in China. Everyone knows that China has got a very prominent and potential as far as economy is concerned, and this is the reason why Europe cannot somehow catch up with China due to the internal conflicts among the member states and between the member states and the Commission. A family cannot be influential when it has internal conflicts. Since the European Union became a political entity, these debates and conflicts have become more frequent. Mr. Szijjártó, Foreign Minister of Hungary, highlighted in his presentation that 40% of each euro gets to the German pockets in the end. Mr. Laurent said that despite the fact that there are very serious grants arriving in Hungary, but still we are in a minus as far as we are a net payer and not a receiver of the European Union. Should it be the Parliament? Should it be the EEC who talk about retaining financial support from Hungary? Of course, we have real debates with them, but we also have huge conflicts with German and French companies because they seem unfortunate.
So if the large companies like, for example, Volkswagen, Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, and so on, can have an influence in how politics is run in the EU, then it is not such a simple question as the Hungarian left wing would like to try to show. Could we have some technical help so that this background noise can go away? Can I turn to the technicians? And so Zoli, as you mentioned, perhaps European Union of strong member states could represent its interests more than the current one. From this regard, it's quite important how the Hungarian elections will go. But since Mr. Melos is here with us, in France there will be general elections in April, and this is going to be a very big game. Whether Macron will stay or will be replaced is a big question because it decides whether we have a centralized European Union or if the right wing can win, either Zemmour or Marine Le Pen, it can give a push towards more strong nation states. So how do you see that, Mr. Melos? Köszönöm. Mármint nem a kérdésért mondok köszönetet, hiszen nem könnyű a saját országunk helyzetéről beszélni, de valóban a magyar választások után egy héttel lesznek nálunk is a választások, és amint tudják, Franciaország egy elnöki rendszer, tehát a fő választás ott az elnökválasztás. Ugye a mi alkotmányunk az olyan, hogy külön választunk elnököt és külön parlamenti képviselőket, és hát az elnök határozza meg, hogy mi lesz az ország politikája a következő 5 évben. Nagyon nehéz előre megmondani, és előre kitalálni, hogy milyen eredménye lesz a választásoknak. Mai napon úgy tűnik, ugye kétfordulós választások vannak, és úgy tűnik, hogy a második fordulóra csak a 2 legtöbb szavazatot nyert jelölt maradhat, és természetesen ez a választók akaratától fog függni, de nagy valószínűséggel a 2 jelölt, aki benn marad a második fordulóban, az egyik oldalon Macron elnök úr lesz, aki egyfajta globalista álláspontot képvisel, nem igazán hisz a francia kultúrában. Még olyanokat is mondott, hogy nincs francia kultúra, meg nincs európai kultúra, hanem azt hiszi, hogy a francia kultúra a globális kultúra része. Tehát ő nagyon követi az amerikai demokraták és mások, például Soros úrnak a véleményét, és akkor vele...
Of his competitors from the right side, and today we don't know which one, because they are very close. One is Marine Le Pen, as you mentioned. One is Éric Zemmour, and the third one is Valérie Pécresse, a lady which is from the Républicain. It's the moderate right-wing party. So they are for the time head-to-head. But I think in that sense, this election may be very important for Europe. I would just say that the three I mentioned, Marine Le Pen, Éric Zemmour, and Valérie Pécresse, they are not against Europe. They are not at all against Europe. I would say they're all three, in a certain way, close to Viktor Orban's position. They all three don't speak of any Frexit. They just all of three want to reform the European Union. They want to reform it to make the European Union less bureaucratic, respecting the identity, respecting the roots of the European civilization, respect what Mr. Chismade quoted as the Judeo-Christianity of the Europeans. They all want less power from the European Commission, more power from the Parliament, European Parliament, and from the member states. Of course, each of the three candidates has some nuance, but all of the three are on the same line. And all of the three are what we can say patriotic. That means they want to protect our French civilization. And I think, personally, that they are right. Because we have in France, as for some of you, we have visited Paris or the big cities, not the place where I'm living, we are protected, but I'm living in a small city, in a small island. But in the main cities, we have, as you know, it's not just a question of the number of illegal migrants, it's a question also of civilization. Another civilization which is not ours is step by step replacing ours. You will see the way the women are dressed. You will see the how to call halal butcher, the way people eat. You will see, and this is growing and growing. And I've even myself some French friends, or even French. They can be from various origin, from African, from anyway, but they don't feel in France anymore. Plus, you have the very big danger of a radical Islam. So this issue will be the main issue of the French election. On one side, Mr. Macron will praise his own way of leadership, the economic situation, so he's supported by some part of the business, not all, some part of the big business. On the other side, you will see the people who are really concerned by this fact that we are losing our identity, we are losing our national spirit. It's not a question of xenophobia or whatever, racism. It's not the question. The question is that the first attachment from the citizens is attachment to our nation. French nation, like the Hungarian nation, like all the European nations, we share a very long and very old history that makes our nation strong and that makes the link of solidarity between the people. If all that disappear, I think we will disappear, we will lose our soul. And if we lose our soul, if we lose our identity, we will lose also the soul and the identity of Europe. Because the soul and the identity of the European Union is the additions of the national identities. And you mentioned Jean Monnet, Schuman, Adenauer, de Gasperi, de Gaulle, Spaak, and over. For all of them at the beginning, each nation, the smallest one, has the right to participate to the European dream. Luxembourg, Malta, Cyprus are part of our European identity with their own diversity, with their own particularity. No one is dominant. And In the last 30 years, unfortunately, the European Union has changed, and I've seen that from my own eyes in my various positions, changing from a union among very pro-European, passionate pro-European like I am, people from various identity, keeping their identity, but adding another identity, which is the European. The European is something additional to your own national identity, and sometimes even regional identity. To be replaced by a centralized bureaucratic administration in Brussels who just follow the idea of globalization, not even European. They don't even defend anymore the European interests, they defend the global interests. So it to be a little long, but this election in France will be very important, determinant. As I say, there won't be a pro-European Mr. Macron and anti-European Le Pen, Zemmour, or Pécresse. Not at all. There will be the two different ways of building Europe. Is it building your interest of European, or is it just making Europe a part of a global system? This will be really the challenge, the key issue of the next French election. So probably the same challenge will be for Hungarian 1 week before. So we are really sisters and brothers in that. Thank you very much.
Nem tudom, hogy jól érzékelem-e azt, hogy
I do not know whether I feel it correctly, and now I'm talking about the French and Hungarian elections, that somehow we reach the end of an epoch. These two elections somehow will influence the future of Europe in any form. Can these elections somehow decide the future direction of the continent, whether there will be a Europe of the nation states or a globalized Europe? Do we perceive it correctly that there is also a stake like that in the case of these two elections? Yesterday I listened to the presentation of Mr. Siarto, who said that the Hungarian elections will have more people coming from the EU Cooperation and Security Council than, for example, the elections in Congo. I think that the situation that has evolved in Europe, something completely different from the situation in the 60s when we visited Western Europe and saw the situation there. The Hungarian elections, I think, could be exemplary if the present government wins these elections. I read many articles about the development, the way how Europe got into the present state. Many people who became rich, well off, somehow gave up lots of beliefs, and these extreme political thoughts somehow gained ground due to this lack of traditional values. However, in Eastern Europe, after the 40 years of past, somehow former traditional values remained. Let us just see the example of Poland and Hungary. So what I think is that from this point of view, it is also very important that the next Prime Minister of Hungary should be Viktor Orban again. Irrespective of the opinion polls, I think the end result is not evident, so we have to mobilize people. As many people as possible should cast their votes on the 3rd of April, so that Fidesz could defend the traditional European values from the position of a government. I think it is completely different if an opposition party would like to safeguard these traditional values. But it is not enough. I think many of us have heard that um, uh, a new political group is being organized within the European Parliament. So this would be the basis for representing these traditional values within the European Union. I do not say that Hungary could change the general situation of Europe, but nevertheless, a repeated victory of Fidesz would clearly indicate that there is an opposition. When we look at Hungarian history, the Hungarian history, I would say that Hungarian people were always apt to fight. And those who lived in the Rákosi era in the 50s all know very well that the 1950-60 revolution was not in vain. This extreme situation, because it's extreme from the point of view of science, from the point of view of ideology, so somehow this situation should be transformed, should be changed, and we have to work a lot. Somehow we should send a message to the people of Europe. We are not working against Europe. We are working for Europe, but with other means, with other instruments. We would like to cooperate, collaborate, and this is our message. People should understand it. Monsieur Henri Malos has already mentioned the people usually are linked to their own country. 90% of the respondents to a European opinion poll revealed that 90% of the people said that they are linked to their own country, and only 10% of the respondents said that in their set of values, Europe is more important than the mother country. So I think this is the normal situation of Europe, and this is somehow why we should also send the message of the former John Paul II, don't be afraid, you are not alone. Yes, one final remark. We are a small country, we are a small nation, especially when compared to France. We can only be an indicator in this story, but why are they so much afraid of us that they send so many observers from the ECSC? Why does the CNN news television request so many interviews from our foreign minister for foreign affairs? Why does the Soros network? Why is the Soros network is so active? Why are we covered by so many newspapers and televisions? Are they afraid of us? But why? We are a civil organization. We do not like the word NGO. This might seem to be just a play with words, but still in Hungary it has a certain relevance because NGOs are an elite club representing uniform values, and all the others, the rest, 60,000 civil organizations prefer to call themselves civil society, civic organization instead of NGOs. We sometimes believe, especially when we listen to the liberal press, that we right-wing conservative people who vote for Fidesz are very chauvinistic, nationalistic. And then it suddenly turns out that there are people who are like-minded in France, Poland, or Italy, or we had friends from Albania who also have same sentiments and mentality. This is a kind of experiment where we could gather, collect, or listen to others' experiences. And this is one of the reasons why our organization was formulated. Of course, we know we are always paid attention to by liberal opposition organizations. For example, I remember that a few years ago I was at a demonstration in a small village, and one of the reporters of a liberal medium was present, and he covered the event in a very biased way, and it was impossible to ask for a correction because he distorted my words. So I know that we have to be very cautious. We have to somehow be very modest. And let me just formulate my question as such. Mr. Soros, George Soros, whom I consider a great thinker, wrote in one of his books a decade ago that NGOs are getting less and less influential and important in modern life. And this is something that should be changed. And what we see after a decade, that he was absolutely right. He is a highly intelligent person. He might be wicked. Just let's think of his attack against the Great British Pound. But let's see his movement in Great Britain, which states that defund the police, or in the United States. I think this is very highly dangerous, and it jeopardizes the society. And right now, when we see his grants to the NGOs, 90% of the NGOs supported by Soros are all fighting or standing up for these woke ideas. The mayor of a capital in a country, I think, is a very prominent figure who can counterbalance sometimes the government or the prime minister. And when we look at the Grand Mayor of Hungary, of Budapest today, and we compare him with the previous mayor, who was a mayor delegated by Fidesz, we can see in our everyday life that there is an enormous gap or difference between them. Olaf Scholz, for example, I saw his CV, that he put down the cigarettes, he stopped smoking, and he started his political career on the initiative of his wife. He's an intelligent person, but he's cannot be compared, for example, to Schröder. When we see his press conferences, we can see that he is an ideal leader in the eyes of Soros, because he is such a boring person without a charisma that is preferable for Soros. When we look at Joe Biden, what is his greatest merit? This is a joke in the States that he is still alive. When we see European leaders, we can see people who lack the charisma, who lack strength, who is not a prominent figure, someone who sometimes loses his way in the White House, an ideal leader. And I think President Macron is not like that. Macron is a characteristic figure, political figure. So President Macron is somewhere between Sarkozy and Hollande, but he really differs from Hollande, who sometimes was not recognized by the people, by his electors, because he was simply not recognizable in the mass.
By the way, I have heard that as well, what Zoli just said, that the liberals are looking for this prototype. If we go back in time a little bit to Péter Medgyessy, Gordon Bajnai, these were prime ministers of Hungary. Ferenc Gyurcsány is a difference, but also the current mayor of Budapest, who really likes to sleep a lot, as he confessed himself. So he doesn't have Napoleonic values. But anyway, I wanted to ask something else, but first I would like to hear Mr. Malos's feedback, because it seems that Macron is now becoming like a role model in the liberal side. What do you think about him? Is he a good example?
Now, you know, I think, as I said, it's not easy to speak about your president because we have to have respect. So I respect the president, I respect Mr. Macron because it's our president. As long as he's our president, we have to respect the main figure of our state. Concerning his own person, Emmanuel Macron, not just the president, I would say he's a role model for a person who has always had a very privileged life, with his family, with school. He made the École Nationale d'Administration, which is the school of the elite. Then he came to Rothschild Bank, and then from Rothschild Bank he came to the government as a as a head of cabinet of François Hollande, that you mentioned, become minister and then become president. His problem, and he even admitted, recently he made a TV show, it was in November, I think, December, November, where he admit that when he was elected president, he didn't know, you know what he didn't know? He didn't know the French people. He had no idea. He said to the TV, admit, I didn't know how the French people live. So I discovered, he said, I discovered French people when I was elected. Why? Because he was always in his life protected. He just saw, you know, when you are a banker of Rothschild Bank, you don't meet normally the average person. He was in merging big business, so you don't know how the average citizens living. He had no idea how the people in the countryside living. He had no idea, and I think it's his main problem. He's really the prototype of someone from the elite who just stay in the elite, in that group, and has no real roots in the population. I saw him the first time that he came to Brussels, and I even was in a debate with him. He was Minister of Economy. It was his first visit to Brussels. And I discovered someone who not just doesn't know how his own country, but he doesn't know Europe. He never visited the European countries, never, as a person. When I was, cannot compare me to him, but as a young person, it was in that time of the Iron Curtain or Berlin Wall, but by curiosity, I tried to visit all the European countries. Mr. Macron never visited. He went once to the US, once he has a stage in somewhere in Africa, but he never visited. He never met the people. So this is typically the symbol of the elite. And I think I'm really scared if the new leaders of the world will be this kind of people, because they don't feel the really need, the really feeling and soul about their population. So as I say today, he doesn't like, I think still, France. For him, France, our country, doesn't have any meaning. He could be president of Europe, president of the world, of the United States. It's the same for him. And that really makes the difference. And that really, I think, is the danger, to have leaders who are not anymore attached to the reality of the people, but who are just the elite, the global leaders, the ideal leaders of Mr. Soros, the ideal leaders of the World Economic Forum. I will just finish one point. You know, today, recently, we got the information of the agenda of Mrs. von der Leyen. You know, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, she's the president of the European Commission. And in the last 2 years, her main visitors, top one, you know, because she's obliged to put publicity about her agenda, were first, George Soros Open Society. The number of visits she got from Mr. Soros, from people from his association. Second, World Economic Forum, the number of visits. Third, I think it was Greenpeace. And just very, very low, trade unions, employers association, SMEs association. It's even, I can say, because I'm still friends in the employers world and in the trade union, it's almost impossible for trade union leaders or employers leaders to meet her. She sent someone to meet them, someone of her cabinet, but herself, she has always all the time to meet Mr. Soros, to meet Mr. Schwab, to meet these people. But the real representative of the people, they don't need. So I think Mrs. von der Leyen, Emmanuel Macron, and some others, these are the prototype of a new kind of elite, which is, I think, very dangerous, because they don't know the population, they don't know their citizens, and really, I think that we need other kind of leaders, like Viktor Orban here in Hungary, like some others, like one of the 3 candidates who will run for the French election, which are people who really, I think, feel, whatever they are, right or left, but they feel the reality of their country, and they are patriotic. And I think the next election in Hungary, in France, in some other countries, will be about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions that I received from the audience. Now I'm going to do like in the evening show of Pesti TV. So I'm going to incorporate the questions and my comments, and it is linked to what Mr. Malos was saying. I'm not sure if we have until 7 o'clock or can we be a little bit later, because we still have a lot of interesting questions. So anyway, as Mr. Malos just mentioned in the end about the priority of the meetings for Ursula von der Leyen, it's interesting that all the leaders of the EU want to meet George Soros. When I worked in Brussels, Mr. Juncker also met Mr. Soros. They gave a big kiss to each other on the cheek. Everybody saw that. Anyhow, let's go to the questions. One of the participants asks if it is true that the majority of the members of the European Parliament are linked to George Soros and his network of money people. So maybe Kochi, you can answer first. We can hear a lot about this in the news. And then after Károly, perhaps Mr. Malos can also answer this question.
751 MEPs form the parliament in Europe. Once I saw a list about MEPs who are in close contact with Soros. Theoretically, they are in minority, but perhaps Monsieur Malos can say more about it because he was. I spent only 6 years in the parliament, but he worked there for many, many years. I have a feeling that when I went there in 2003, the European Parliament not only shifted to the left, but somehow moved to the extreme left into the direction of cultural communism. This is a far left direction based on the Frankfurter School instead of the European traditional values, gender ideology, and the woke culture. A parliament which fights for the open society objectives, which means, in other words, that losing national sovereignty, losing national values and traditions, not only because that they are financed, these 260 people are financed by Soros. It doesn't depend on money, but somehow these people are above all elected on their ideology, on the basis of their ideology. There was an extreme left young communist politician, Rudi Dutschke. I don't know whether you have heard about him. The 68 generation. A long march into the institutions. That's what Dutschke said. And I think this far left ideology equipped with the Frankfurter teachings. First, they occupied the universities, but then the courts, not only the European Court of Justice is trying to teach us a lesson, but we can also see Salvini's example in Italy. I think trade unions somehow got into a vacuum. Trade unions, especially the socialist left-wing trade unions, were strong when there were huge, large-scale enterprises, when they had thousands of members in one enterprise. Enterprises remained, but they lost members. Right now, trade unions are not standing up for better wages, but they have a political role today. And this is also the same. The former social democratic parties were also occupied after the political changes that started in the social democratic party. And when I met and saw the German social democratic parties, they were completely different from the ones today. So first they occupied the universities, and the young graduates simply marched into the courts, the institutions, into the trade unions, into the political parties, and practically the same company occupied everything. Should Soros fail to finance them, they themselves would behave the same. I think Soros is not the only cause of the problem. The main problem is that this whole shift, it's a long process, and it would be very difficult to change it. And this is the reason why we should vote for parties who would send MEPs to the parliament who are different. ideology-wise.
Also to the question, it's very acute question because in reality they are not the majority. In reality, I mean in the numbers, but in reality, they are the most influential. That means that this woke movement goes around almost all the group, including some right-wing groups, because of the activities of the influence of these so-called NGOs, the lobby pro-LGBT and others, so it's Open Society and a lot of them, who are so active, first because they are supported by the European Commission. So the European Commission is the big power in Brussels. They have the money, they have all the links. Secondly, the NGOs, these NGOs are like at home in the European Parliament. It's their home. As I say, traditional trade unions, employers, they are sometimes invited, but one among all of us. But these NGOs, they are every day treated as they belong to the Parliament. But I will really insist on that fact that unfortunately a lot of members of Parliament who don't personally support this woke movement, they are afraid to speak. Because if they speak in their own group or in the tribune of the Parliament, they will be immediately point out, quoted, described as anti-LGBT, as racist, as xenophobe, as people who are baddies. So more and more I see it's changing, but we really need, and I think it's why I really like the initiative you take, not just here in Hungary, but also European-wide, to create a European network, is really needed to counterbalance this negative influence of these NGOs by other movements who can be present in Brussels, who can give arguments. I can see, for example, in the biggest political group of the European Parliament is the EPP. The EPP is normally, traditionally, I belong in the past to the EPP. I make with them the SME movement. The EPP is a traditional Christian conservative movement. But even in the EPP, you had in the last years more and more members who stay silent when we were facing this resolution, supporting this NGO, supporting LGBT propaganda and others. To be afraid, to be seen as radicals, not to be to be attacked by the European Commission. And you know, the European Parliament is a huge machinery with a lot of money, too much money, with another problem. And we have to be more active, more influential. That means this network that you want to create with others, with partners, to be there to support these MEPs, these European members, European Parliament, who share our opinions. And I think that they are not far to be the majority, but today they are unfortunately a silent majority in front of a very vocal, maybe minority, but very vocal, who seems to be dominant. So it's really a question of our own action to change that situation. That situation can be changed. We have next European election in 2024. There is a possibility to have a larger group of conservatives, and if you take conservatives, not just identity democracy, ECR, European Conservative, but also European People Party, even some members of other groups from the center, even from the left, could share our opinion on some point, but we have to encourage them, we have to give them arguments, and that they should feel confident to speak out, and not just to let the other side speak. Thank you.
Please forgive me before we turn to the next question, Perhaps you will not be able to answer that question, but very briefly let me react on what we have heard so far. Verhofstadt was a great friend of Hungary who achieved in the EP that MEP could also be at the same time the lobbyist of a multinational company. When we imagine an MEP, we should know that he is completely different from a member of parliament in Hungary. In Hungary, a member of parliament can only work for the parliament. They cannot work anywhere else. But this is not the case in the European Parliament. Their members of the Parliament somehow can benefit from, financially benefit from being an MEP. And one more thing that I would like to share with you, recruiting, the procedure of recruiting, what is the reality? Of course, although we are regarded as unintelligent by left-wing lobbyists, we are not. So do not imagine a situation when Soros's representatives call their employees that where should I transfer your money? No, the procedure is much more complex and complicated. We are talking about scholarship programs, traveling, studying, social relations, contacts, friendships are forged during these scholarship programs when the judge and judges and the representatives of the NGOs meet, spend valuable time together. They became personally acquainted. So let us be frank. Judges are invited at events organized by NGOs. What's more, we also know that they also deliver sensitivity trainings. For example, the Helsinki Commission organized these LGBTQ seminars where the judges met the activists and they do not only receive information, but they also receive the support and sympathy of these NGOs. So let us be objective. Judges, of course, are not recruited; they are somehow educated and enchanted.
Igazából
We have very little time left, so actually what just came to my mind is, as Mr. Chair also mentioned, as Zoli, what you said is true. It is rather difficult to change, but can we achieve it based on the initiatives of EUSET or TUF? Can we achieve it that it can be that, for example, when I was in Brussels for 3 days, I could only see the leaders of the Helsinki Committee and the Amnesty International in the corridors of the European Parliament. So when you actually go there to Brussels, these are the people that you meet. So can we achieve it that, for instance, also Zoltán Lobnici can be there, and he can also sensitize the MEPs to the ideology of EUSET. So this is the fight. Can we achieve this, that other civil society organizations can also set their foot there and can also sensitize? So this will be the last question for today's conference.
The audience gave you one. Of course, we can achieve. You know, it's just a question of will. It's a question to be vocal, not to stay silent. Because, as I say, these people are in reality a minority. They're even minority in the European Parliament among the members, as I mentioned. But our people remain silent, not all, but the majority of them, because they are not so sure, they are not supported. So of course it's possible, of course. And I remember when I was president of the European Economic and Social Committee, I took the time to go to Strasbourg every month to all the plenary sessions. I stay there during 3 days, 4 days, and I try to meet the maximum of members of parliament. And I can assure you there were a lot of them very open, very interested. You have to be present. If you are not there, the other took your place. You have to well organize and be present. This is the only way. But I'm confident that this will change. If the election will be won in Hungary, beginning of April, in France 1 week later, we can make really the difference. And when the new parliament will be elected into the European Parliament 2024, there could be not just a majority of numbers, but a majority in the hearts and in the soul of the people. This may be changed. Of course, we need, as Mr. Chesmedia mentioned, a big reform of European institutions, of course. And the main target of that reform should be the European Commission. As I mentioned today, I reveal you that figures, but we can't admit that the President of the European Commission has as his first visitor Mr. Soros. We can't accept that. Should have as first visitors the real representative of a European citizen. This should change, and this may change with a reform of European institutions, giving more power to the Council, more power to the Member State, to the government, more power to the European Parliament if it's reformed, and much less power to the European Commission. European Commission, from the spirit of a founder father of the European Union, was not a political body. It was an executive body of experts, competent experts, will engage what was decided by the minister and by the people. That was the task of a high authority. It was the first name. And it is through our friend Caroli very, very rightly quoted that, by the change in Amsterdam, Nice, and then Lisbon Treaty, they changed the European Commission from that group of experts in a political body, dominated today by the left or by the woke movement, left or I would say center-left, center-right, but in the same direction. This has nothing to do with the spirit of the founder fathers. I think it has been a big deviation of the concept of the European Union. And your movement, Mr. Chismedia, and your activities is not against Europe, it's for Europe. Because if we continue with this woke, I would say, ideology, this condemnation, totally unfair condemnation of Poland and Hungary, which I personally very strongly condemn. If we continue on that direction, that will be the collapse of the European Union. It will be the collapse because the European Union will be split in various parts. The citizens won't accept that, and we have a danger to see war coming back to Europe. So if we want to fight for peace, we have to fight for a reform of Europe. Thank you very much.
Just very briefly, please. I would just like to add that what's going on in Western Europe is very similar to the Cultural Revolution in China. And when you talk with the Chinese, you know that 90% or more than 90% of the people knew that it was an oppression. And I think this tendency is going to pass and it's going to change. And as Henri said, we will be able to have better representatives, better members of parliament who will speak for the citizens, for the people. and who will be more active and not stay silent. I would like to quote a Chinese proverb that says that if you want to defeat the tiger, first you have to defeat it hypothetically. So first we have to have a concept, and we have to spread this concept. We have to stand concept against concept, civil society organization against civil society organization, and also media outlets against media outlets. So this is what we have to collect and organize in a network. This is how we can proceed. And I do hope that at the next EU parliamentary elections, we can change the tendency. Zoli, you have the final word for today. I would like to thank you all for being here. I would like to extend a very warm thank to Mr. Malos for honoring us with his presence. And also on behalf of Laszlo Csizmadia as well as myself, we would like to thank you for being here with us and sharing your thoughts with us. So what can I say as a closing word? Although I would like to share an anecdote, a joke, when we talked about the French-German friendship, we have a funny anecdote that is relating to that, and it's about what are the shortest books in the world? The book of German humor, the book of the delicacies of British cuisine, and perhaps also one of the shortest books could be the book of the European Commission's Good Deeds. What we have to know is that with President Macron being here, he actually managed to take a step towards resolving the former cool relationships. And so when he was visiting and meeting with Mr. Orbán, he said that even though he himself didn't agree with the thoughts of Mr. Orbán, but he had to admit that these are also European thoughts. And that's kind of a defeat, that's kind of a win for us, because it shows that we are not second-class citizens of Europe, but we are equal citizens of Europe. We have a culture that goes back 1,000 years. We have history, values that we are proud of, and that are just as valuable as the values of any other European nation. So we are on equal level with the French or any other cultures. Thank you for the closing words, Mr. Zoltán Lomnici. I also thank you if you have come to join this meeting or if you have been following us on Facebook. Thank you all for being with us and thinking together. I hope you all enjoyed this exchange. And before we sing Szózat, I would just like to mention that next time we are going to meet on the 23rd of February. Hopefully, we will have an exciting conversation with the psychologist Emőke Bogdi. And obviously, we are going to touch upon the LGBTQ propaganda and also the referendum about the protection of children. So please join us again on that event. And now I wish you a nice weekend. And please, let's sing Szózat.